the pandemic, right? Like the world went through a lot, and you, among many others, were definitely the firefighters and like kind of just saving the world at that point of time. What was going on during that time? Can you talk to me a little bit about that? And also, like, how did that journey ultimately pan into what you're now venturing into?
And I know it sounds very cliche, but I went into medicine to help people. There's such a level of trust, whether it's my own family or whether it's the patients that I'm taking care of. The data shows that spending a minute or 2 minutes total just listening to someone makes a big difference. If I go to work and I do surgeries on the airway or I take care of sick patients with COVID as I am being asked to do, what if I make my family members or my children sick? And I started to realize my mortality. What am I doing here in this world? Like, what's my impact? What if I could meet a younger version of myself and I could coach younger physicians rather than having doctors getting burnt out, help them to find a way to find joy again in their work? If a patient comes to see me in the hospital and I ask them to rinse their nose with water that's clean and do all of these things to take care of their surgery, have I really thought about where they live?
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Building It Big. With me today, I have Ayesha Khalid, who is a physician, more specifically an otolaryngologist, which a lot of people just know as an ENT or an ear, nose, and throat doctor. Ayesha, thank you for being with us today, and welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for your introduction, Shreyas. So good to see you. Thank you for allowing me to be on this excellent show. So, as mentioned, my name is Ayesha Khalid. I live in the United States. I am an ear, nose, and throat physician, or an otolaryngologist, which no one can pronounce. I am practicing specifically rhinology or nasal surgery. So anything that people may have of their nose and sinuses is my area of specialty. And at this point, I've been practicing for about 20 years or so. So time flies, and it's been quite a journey.
Certainly does. And yeah, Aisha, thanks again for that intro and for coming over. I wanted to start off. I mean, you've got an exemplary journey, what I would call, right? Like for someone who's been proven as a really classic physician, and then of course like helped out people in several different ways, not just through surgery, but also eventually going back and like giving a lot to community and then building communities as well. So I do want to cover that entire thing. But let's just begin from your story. Like, how did you become a doctor? What was that journey like? When did that happen? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was born in New York City, grew up in Canada, actually. So a very different healthcare system. And I went into medicine, and I know it sounds very cliche, but I went into medicine to help people. I just felt that having a conversation and really understanding what's wrong with someone and really leading them on that healthcare journey would be exciting. And then specifically surgery, I love working with my hands. And now in hindsight, in high school, I used to enjoy woodworking and I really wanted to do things with carpentry or building, but there wasn't a career I could figure out back in the day. So that will come full circle later. But so that was my journey and my start. And then to be honest, I think in life we meet people and they are excellent mentors. So by the time I decided I wanted to go into medicine and I started medical school, I met a gentleman who is an ear, nose, and throat surgeon, but also maybe the founding father of sinus surgery in the US. And so Dr. Kennedy introduced me to this field and this subspecialty niche. And really, I think that's why I chose it. He was a great research mentor, a great human being. He's still practicing today. And I think we all pick things based on people we know that lead by example. So that is really the truth of what led me to this specialty.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. I mean, I look back at my own life. A lot of things which I've done is certainly a reflection of people I met and people I got inspired from, and I think that's just very, very true. So, so I mean, you then became a doctor, and then you of course like picked this field and started going through this journey. So when exactly did this begin? Like, I mean, when were you starting as a full-time physician?
So I graduated medical school in 2003.
Hmm.
And gosh, it seems crazy to say out loud at the, right after the turn of the century. So since 2004, through the
Yeah,
residency training and the specialty training, I've been practicing medicine. And
yeah,
then I would say as a full-fledged adult practicing on my own since 2009, in fact. And I've
yeah,
worked in a variety of settings. I've worked
yeah,
in community hospitals, I've worked in private practice, I've worked in academics. I'm on faculty here at Harvard Medical School, but really right now, my job at the current hospital I work, Cambridge Health Alliance, is really to help the underserved. And so we really serve a lot of the population in Boston that it would be tough for them to get care otherwise. That has been honestly the most gratifying part of my career.
yeah. And I think for a lot of people who don't know about this, the US healthcare system is definitely not the most egalitarian, and it does not really provide the same set of care, of course, to different financial sectors of the society, right? So I think just kind of like stepping into that and like helping out, you'd still say the majority of the community who still go through that community sort of hospitals is massive, I would say.
Absolutely. And I think you raise a really good point, and you've got experience with Boston here, but you have the upper echelon of innovation, med
Yeah,
device, Harvard, MIT, and at the same time you've got an entire group of the population that doesn't have what we call in the United States commercial insurance, a
yeah,
good payment system where they can afford to get care when they want, how they want it. So that's really been an eye-opening process, and really the first time. It's my 10th year, in fact, this year at Cambridge Health Alliance. And as chief of our division within our department, really the goal is how can we make sure to get care in a timely fashion? But to be honest, I think that's a global struggle. I
yeah,
think that's a global struggle. It's just unusual that we have so much prosperity in this country, and yet we're not able to, figure that out, how to get that not just equitably, but really in a way that it's easy enough to access and understand, even with the different languages in the US.
yeah.
But I think globally, the provision of healthcare has become a very tough proposition for a lot of people based on distance or cost.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, on a tangent, I was reading a different stat in some other context that the world produces enough food to feed the whole Earth 7 times, but there's still people who are dying out of like hunger, right? And this is I think very telling in like several different sectors, healthcare being one, right? Wherein there are few people who just have so much, wherein they could afford, I don't know, private everything, but then there are people who just like dying on the streets and they just can't like get an emergency care at points.
Right. I have a colleague who's been working on food insecurity, and it's something that, my husband's very passionate about. My family's originally from Pakistan. I should say
Hmm.
my family's from Pakistan. My husband's family's from Bangladesh. And,
Yeah,
all four of our parents were immigrants to the United States. And I think that story of this is the land where everything is available if you work hard enough, I think that story was quite true and has
yeah,
become very difficult, whether
mhm,
you were born here or you live here. And you just have to make the best of it and really take advantage of opportunities. But sometimes the things you see are sad. So I think you're absolutely right. The healthcare outcomes of our
yeah,
nation are nowhere near where they could be if we had a better system of distribution, just like the food example that you mentioned.
yeah. Yeah, and this all kind of fans very nicely into what your journey has been like coming from an immigrant family, seeing the suffering in like a first, second degree, kind of like witnessing on the ground, being in a medical profession, and of course like understanding it more on the ground, right? So you, I think, is one of those people who've been more of a holistic practitioner, like kind of not just going in like, okay, fine, here's a disease, let me go cure it, but then like you try to understand like, okay, what is going on in the people's mind, what is going on in their community, the society, all of that. Can you talk to me a little bit about like how do you develop that sort of an empathy, and how do you even like go around all of that?
Yes, I believe the older I get in my career, the more I am less interested in saying, I know a surgery and I think I can do it on you. So a lot of my patients are surprised at this point. The goal is, you're a mom of three. I had a patient yesterday. You're a mom of three. You're taking care of your children and your pets and your parent. You're here. How do we get you better so you can get home to take care of your family? And maybe that answer is not surgery right now. Maybe we have to think about when and how you pursue the intervention with the context of your life, because I think that really improves compliance and improves understanding. I think that journey for me had always been there. I went into medicine expecting that we would be able to carry that out. And
Yeah,
I learned that we all get into the workplace and we get into the churn of, this is the subspecialty I know, let me apply it. But the patient that's coming to see you is a full fledged human being. And they might have lost their job recently, or their spouse got sick and that's why they didn't follow up or were not able to take the medicine. Maybe they're scared of having surgery. Somebody who's a family member died undergoing a procedure.
yeah,
So, teasing that out, I think, along the way has made a really big difference. But to take that even further, something that I'll be even more interested in the future is the marriage of Eastern medicine with Western medicine. There are so many holistic healing practices, whether it's meditation, which has now become more mainstream in the
yeah,
United States, but was not something I grew up with or trained with, um, physiotherapy, massage, acupuncture. Those are all equal methods of stress reduction in my mind
yeah,
as taking medicine for heartburn or getting on a blood pressure medication. So the dilemma now is, how do we empower the physicians that are trained in Western medicine to be open and accepting of that? So, my journey now is, you're here, you're feeling stressed, it's exacerbating your inflammatory disease of your allergies and your sinuses. What can we do about your stress? If we can
yeah,
bring that down and you can manage your disease state, maybe you don't need the surgeries or medicines I have to offer. But I will tell you, Shreyas, it's a very strange conversation. A lot of patients, by the time they see me as the, third physician they're seeing for the problem, they
yeah,
expect me to provide them with a very specific tool. And having this broader conversation, they're sometimes still surprised. So, are we doing surgery or not? And it's like,
yeah.
well, let's try some other things, right? Tell me about your life. Like, how can we edit what you're up to see whether you can get better? And that's been remarkable for a lot of the non-cancerous treatments, that conditions that I treat that are really, I think of them as lifestyle conditions. If you have allergies or sinus issues, so much can be prevented by what's around you or what you're eating, in
Yeah.
fact, and what's going in your body.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and I've seen this from both sides a little bit, right? Of course, like interfacing with you and the team a little bit at the MIT front, but then also from a patient point of view, you meet three doctors in succession, and they're all taking notes, and they're hardly looking at you. So there's that like absolute miss of like a human to human connection, which is what I think people like you are extremely bringing into this whole society now. But also at the same time, to the patient, like, fine, you're not looking at me, not listening, you're probably listening to me. But then why is the other person asking me the same question? And then that, I think, kind of just gets on to people's nerve. Hey, I'm like, hey, I have this ailment. And then I have to like keep answering those questions as well. But I think somebody who just understands that, I think that itself, I have always found as like a big step as well in that direction.
Right. I mean, absolutely. Data shows that spending a minute or 2 minutes total
Yeah,
just listening to someone, whether it's in a conversation or as a physician to a patient, makes a big difference. I think that has to do with just the presence that we
mhm,
all want in a
yeah,
conversation, but then you particularly want when you're seeing your physician. It's interesting that you mentioned our work at MIT, because I think we always used to talk about technology bending the cost curve and making a difference. I'm excited that we're bringing technology smartly into the healthcare system, perhaps with scribes that are AI enabled to allow someone or some entity to be formulating the note and the plan and carrying out the steps that you see that clinicians, doing on the computer, could allow us a little bit more face-to-face time. And I think that is
Yeah.
what doctors crave. That is what nurses crave with their patients.
Yeah, 100%, right? I mean, there's been so much of chatter about like, oh, AI is gonna be adverse in some direction. But I think with healthcare, I definitely think all the mechanical tasks, which is like, oh, let me do the note taking, let me make sure that the EHRs are filled and whatnot. Maybe that is what AI should actually take over. And the human to
Absolutely.
human is like where the doctors and the nurses, they all just come through. Yeah. Amazing. So, Asha, one thing I wanted to touch upon, and this is like also very telling of your journey, but I mean, again, it's like a build up as well on that one. The pandemic, right? Like the world went through a lot,
Mm,
and you, among many others, were definitely the firefighters and like kind of just saving the world at that point of time, right? That was also, if I read like how your journey went through, an inflection point in some way where you said like, okay, hold on, wait a minute, I need to see this at a bigger level, at a bigger scale, I need to zoom out, right? Do you yeah, what was going on during that time? Can you talk to me a little bit about that? And also, like, how did that journey ultimately pan into what you're now venturing into?
absolutely. I think the pandemic was definitely a scary time. So I mentioned at the beginning, I met Dr. Kennedy, I did
Yeah.
research. Sinus disease, the nose, the airway was so exciting. But if you fast forward to 2020, that is primarily where COVID is received and transferred, is through your nose and your throat and your breathing.
Yeah.
So the pandemic was particularly scary for me, not because I knew the data or the science or the future in figuring out that, many of us would be okay and we would have ability to get medications. But frankly, my first thought was, if I go to work and I do surgeries on the airway or I take care of sick patients with COVID as I am being asked to do, what if I make my family members or my children sick and they die? So I think that fear, which now in hindsight, however real that was really a driving force to say, would that be worth it? Would it be worth it that, I'm putting myself at risk every day? What's the goal? What's the outcome? And there's such a level of trust, whether it's my own family or whether it's the patients that I'm taking care of. There's such a level of trust that they all feel that I will do a great job and take really good care of them. And then fast forward to that they will be okay. And I started to realize my mortality, that is not necessarily entirely true. I don't have ultimate control over my health, over their health, over my children's health. And at the end of the day, I have to really pause and say, these are my limits and what brings me joy. And the first thing I realized, so that's the first thing that happened, but the first outcome of that is I realized how valuable time is. And it's a funny way that I realized that. It's because we switched in the early months of the pandemic from in-person care to remote care, probably for those 6 or 8 weeks where we didn't know what was going to happen. And we only went to the hospital when someone was really sick or we had to do the surgery. Otherwise, I would meet you as a patient via telehealth, which, by the way, as you know,
Yeah.
many of us had been saying was a great way to do things, but it was not really the norm.
Yeah.
As you did the telehealth visits, often when people got busy or weren't able to make their appointment, it sort of gave me time to just sit and reflect, to sit at a desk and reflect and think, what am I doing here in this world? Like, what's my impact? I just assumed that I went into medicine and then that would have the greatest impact. But could I have greater impact? What else could I be doing? Both to sort of impart to our children the value of family and time with your loved ones, and also to impart to myself that there might be something bigger or greater out there that I'm destined to do. And maybe I haven't figured that out yet. So I would say, I don't know if it was an inflection point. I would almost say it was eye opening
Yeah.
in terms of I can now choose to decide what happens in the next many years of my life. And I really have to be thoughtful about it. You mentioned that the path in my journey, the next step was, well, I do love the practice of medicine. I do love taking care of the patients, but I do not enjoy the background typing and administrative work. And to some degree, that does burn a lot of us out. So, what if I could meet a younger version of myself and I could coach younger physicians, younger providers, younger nurses, particularly women who are struggling with when and how to balance raising a family, and say, here's how I would do it again. I would craft your work so that it's a little more flexible and you have time in the evening when your children are little, for example, because that's what I would have wanted. So I started doing a all-out coaching journey. I took courses with Tony Robbins, Community. I signed up for the Leadership Mastery. I really am now working on converting that into a life mission, one of my life missions, which is rather than having doctors getting burnt out, help them to find a way to find joy again in their work so that they will be better providers, better human beings, better able to take care of themselves, therefore better able to take care of you as a patient. So that was the first step. But as you know me, Shreyas, and you're the same way, I thought, well, there's probably more to it than that. And I have to say, this next part was really unexpected in that my husband and I and a good friend of ours went to a real estate course, and it was really out of the blue. It was really, let's think about what drives human beings in the workplace. One of the things that drives us, particularly when we start in our careers, is the love of the work.
Yeah.
I love medicine. I love taking care of the patients. But the stressor that comes as you get older, have a family, have responsibilities, have to pay bills, is money. And the more I got into the coaching world, the more I understood that in order to be able to contribute, you have to be able to take care of yourself, and then you can donate your time and money to others. Yeah. So then the next step was, how does one get financially abundant? Because if folks have financial abundance, they're able to have that peace of mind that you and I were talking about earlier, to pay for healthcare, to pay for services. And really, the stretch into exploring real estate was, what are ways to make a passive income for ourselves and our family so that, our parents came to this country and said, you work until you retire. And then if you have energy left, you might be able to travel. But our children, we want them to grow up differently, and we want them to take care of others who don't have as much. So that's really what led. That was, I think, the impetus to the real estate journey and passive investing. And then it just grew from there in a wild and crazy way.
Yeah. And just to kind of add a little more blurb onto this. So this real estate investment vehicle is called APEX Multifamily. And what you do here, if you were to say this in your own words, because you're better at saying this. So why don't you go ahead?
Yes. So what happened is, we basically went and I took a course, and APEX Multifamily Capital is our company. And what I do is buy, hold, and sell with a group, with a syndicate, apartment buildings, currently in the United States, usually in areas where there are up and coming communities. And for the reason that this really struck a chord with me is that you can buy and sell apartment buildings anywhere and maybe not even put that much love or effort into it. But if you really want to improve the lives of people, you may want to start with the security of where they live and what they eat. And to me, this was the security of where they live. So we not only buy, hold, and sell apartment buildings. So let's say, a recent one we had was in Jacksonville, Florida. And another one was in Des Moines, Iowa. The goal is this group of investors and I, through Multifamily Mindset, that's the name of the group, really says, before you start doing anything where you're raising rents or making it more expensive to live somewhere, let's start by fixing all the problems that exist. So whether it's new appliances, a place for your kids to play with a park, more lighting, better lighting in the parking lot so that you feel secure taking your kids to the car at night if you're a mom, better front desk security. You do all of these valuable additions, you make it a place that people want to live, and then naturally they'll gravitate to staying in your apartments. You may raise the rent a little bit, but not before you've done it and not abruptly. So you do it slowly over several years.
Yeah.
And then financially, what that does is it makes your apartment building as a whole more valuable. And
Yeah.
then once you've created that, you move on. But what you've left in your wake, what I loved seeing this community doing and why I got even more into this business, not just from investing myself, but really to being part of the management team of some of these apartment buildings, is you are now improving a community where people are starting to feel safer. They're starting to feel more secure. They're starting to feel like just because they don't live in the most expensive apartment building, they're not able to have clean water, clean appliances, clean flooring, no pests, rats, mice, cockroaches. And those are all things that in cities now or even towns are so prevalent, right? And so you want to help them live in a clean place. And when I saw that mission with this group, I thought, wow, if a patient comes to see me in the hospital, for example, and I ask them to rinse their nose with water that's clean and do all of these things to take care of their surgery, have I really thought about where they live? And is it sanitary? And do they feel safe? And are they so overworked to pay their rent that they're not able to? It just kind of feels like I'm earlier in the mission now with the real estate. But I loved it. And to tie it back to what I said earlier, remember I said in high school I loved woodworking and carpentry. So just the thought that building materials, the way in which we improve flooring, lighting, foundations. We're now currently in a land development deal that is going to start from the ground up. And I can tell you that my most exciting part will be to put on the hard hat and learn like how a building is built. I know that sounds sort of nutty for someone that does something very different, but I can't wait to see, hey, you put together something and then people come to live here and they love living here and they tell other people what a great community it is. And maybe they gather in the lobby and have a backyard barbecue. I think that builds that social fabric that we're lacking now in our, work lives and our remote Zoom lives on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, I agree. I think there are many people who say life comes a full circle, but you're like a physical embodiment of that in a lot of ways. So some of the things which you said, and I was just kind of like making a mental and more of a paper note as well, while you were still like very actively just a physician at a point of time, right? You said something like, I was always thinking about like, how do I get this patient home, right? I think that's just such an immigrant mindset as well. Like, okay, how do I get home? What is home? That definition and everything. And again, just from an outsider's perspective, I think that get home has just like stuck on with you. Whether that's like, oh, here's a regular patient who I'm treating. I need to make sure that they are okay and they get out of this hospital and go where their family is. Even when the pandemic happened, your concern and your thoughts were always around, there's so many people now in abundance who are going through something. How do I make sure they are okay and they get home? How do I myself get home safely with my family? And then now with APEX, I think that's the core mission, which again kind of is still very much close to your heart. It's like, okay, all these people probably don't have a home, right? How do you make a safe home and then get them home, right? That I think kind of just like tells me very much into, okay, here's where you've always like stuck with that thing. And you've just been very, very true to that thing. Like, okay, here is a human who needs to get home, right?
You're so masterful, Shreyas. I think I will steal that and put it right on our website at Apex. I will say, I think you're right. I think that all of us that, we talk about culturally diverse backgrounds, and that's such a conversation in this day and age. And I think that as patients, you're trying to understand what people's background is. But I think you're 100% right. And it isn't just being able to get back to your home, but the other word you inserted was feeling safe, feeling
Yeah.
secure, that where you live is happy and you're okay with it. And you can go to sleep at night knowing that you're taken care of. And the second piece that you brought up, which is 100% true, is not everyone can at this moment, even in the United States of America, be able to afford to purchase their own home. Therefore, if they are living in an apartment as they are building their career, putting themselves through school or residency training, having a job, thinking about the dream that they want to potentially own a home, the reality is they still deserve a really good place to live.
Yeah.
And I think that for many people, home ownership may never be a reality. Therefore, they deserve a lifelong good place to live, right? It's all about priorities. What do you enjoy? Maybe you enjoy traveling more
Yeah.
than spending your money on a mortgage. And I think that's very valid and very fair in this day and age. But I never thought of it that way as you tie it together. But I think you're absolutely right. Having grown up witnessing the worry that people have when they immigrate anywhere, but
Yeah.
particular to the US, to try to meet that bar of like, where will my home be? What neighborhood? Will the school system be good? And I know I can't fix everything, but I feel like this makes a step in the secure and wonderful place to live, which I think really directly impacts people's health care. If they don't have food to eat in a safe
Yeah.
place to live, you're not going to make a lot of progress on, I want you to exercise and lower your blood pressure and take care of your sinus health and manage your allergies with, avoiding these plants or flowers. So I think that's just part and parcel of it.
Yeah, and I think you're absolutely right. Like people take several different directions in this, right? Like one is, of course, continue doing your job as a physician, which is, I would say, order of 100 that you could influence maybe in a year, maybe
Right.
over the course of years, right? Then a lot of people go down the route of charity. It's like, okay, fine, let me find an institution which would do good. And then probably that grows by 10x, like few thousand people you could potentially influence.
Yeah.
But
Yes.
then that's where kind of the second layer ends, and the epitome or like the end of this journey is like, okay, let me go ahead and change policy, which in any country, any jurisdiction is always hard, right?
Yes.
So I love the fact that you found somewhere in the middle, like, okay, I can probably not influence 300 million people, and I don't want to like stop at 1,000. I could do very much like within that few 100,000 range, which is
Yes.
like, okay, let me deploy these micro institutions or more like the condominiums and apartment blocks, which are going to be communities wherein I will make sure that every detail is looked after and people are living like humans here. They have a life, right? And then you rinse, repeat that model, all while ensuring that there is a financial benefit to the funder as well. It's not like, okay, it's not a charity case.
Absolutely. So that it becomes self sustaining, which is all the stuff we teach,
Yeah,
right? And in all the courses we've been involved in ventures. But there's another part to this that you're
yeah,
reminding me. One of the things that really raised my enthusiasm was that when I went to these courses and trainings, and I still go to visit, the different multifamily mindset courses, the folks there that are young, much younger than I, at the start of their careers, either in college or in their early 20s, who have not have said, I don't want to follow the traditional path of what I could do for a job, quote unquote, or I am not satisfied to have this sales job in this company at the age of 24 that then I will be doing for a while. And I'm not sure that this will allow me the financial security for me or my family, my future family. I think the other thing that this offers is a way for folks to learn how to have financial abundance for themselves and then be able to do what they're passionate about as
yeah,
well. So I have been very inspired. I think there were students as young as 18 and as old as in their 60s. And some of the the 18-year-olds, two of them in particular, and folks 5, 10 years older than I, are all successful moving along in this real estate world, whether it's multifamily or anything else, building careers that this one kiddo, Michael, he would not be doing right now. He would be taking classes, and I have kids in university right now, and I'm a big fan of higher education. I've had so much higher education. But I think in some ways, a lot of the universities in our country and around the world are charging so much money. And when the students are coming out, they're not necessarily being able to have that economic opportunity that they once would have, or easily be able to get a job. It's been fascinating to watch them be taking classes, but then also be doing real estate, which is allowing them to, for example, pay their tuition. And to me, you're changing the trajectory of somebody's life. You're really teaching them early that you can become self-sufficient and then sort of lift others up with you. So I think that's why I think the community gives me a lot of juice and enthusiasm to see what they're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, and I think another thing in what you said, which I was thinking about. So any of these good schools, right, or any of the large schools worldwide, they charge for education and they charge for community, essentially, right? Like you get
Yes.
that tag of like, oh, I'm a Harvard alum, I'm an MIT alum, whatever, right?
Yes.
And that is really the bigger price. The education, I mean, for what it's worth,
Yes.
CS50 is a free course, right?
Yes.
Lots of you could just go to YouTube and see so many lectures nowadays, right?
Yes.
The latter is what is costly no matter what, right? You're either born into a family and you have access to that community, or you have the money and then you have access to the community, and you kind of like going about it in the same way. I'm not going to be able to change the rules of this game.
Yeah.
If you have to buy into the community, let me empower you so that you can buy into a community somewhere, right?
Yes.
Whether that's like learning about financial freedom or like financial literacy and all of that, which is kind of the same thing in a way. Right?
Exactly. Financial literacy. So thinking back to what I would have taught my younger self.
Yeah.
Medical school, for anyone listening who wants to go, whether it's in Europe or the United States, especially in the United States, it's very expensive.
Yeah.
And one of the things that we don't learn enough in higher education, whether it's engineering, law, medicine, or teaching, is the financial literacy of how you will be able to sustain and provide yourself in the long term without thinking, I'll just work more. I'll just work more so that when I hit the pandemic, what we saw was, and then I'll quit.
Yeah.
So many physicians in particular said, I'm burnt out. And to my conversation earlier about the financial literacy piece is necessary before the financial abundance piece, which is then necessary for you to say, I'm wealthy, but I'm not wealthy because I have money. I'm wealthy because I'm happy with what I'm doing and I love my life and I have joy. I think that's true wealth. What the financial abundance is providing me is simply the ability to carry out my life in the way that I want to be an example to others. And I want to be proud of who I am, which I think is something that we often don't get taught in school.
Yeah.
Are you proud of who you are as a person and what you do, as opposed to what grade did you get on this last examination?
Yeah.
Which is how I was raised. And, I see so many others under so much pressure.
Yeah.
But I just want to start changing that story. And I think you're right. I think changing the system and saying I could have somehow impacted medical education to become so much more warm and fuzzy and say, I know it matters that you are an excellent surgeon and you know what you're doing with patient care, but you know what matters more? Are you taking care of yourself? Because if you're not taking care of yourself, you can't be that best physician to others. I didn't think that I could move that needle as readily. So I think you're right. I have found another avenue to channel that financial literacy piece earlier for people.
Yeah. Yeah. It's all about ensuring that the machine's well oiled, because otherwise it won't work, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Absolutely. All right. So one thing I really like asking people, through your really glorious career, you must have had many such moments wherein you've just been very proud of yourself, something which you did, and you're like, wow, I've influenced something in so much of greatness, right? We kind of typically call these as eureka moments as well. What was that one eureka moment for you that you love sharing?
Well, this is going to warm your heart. I would say it was meeting all of you at
Uh,
MIT Hacking Medicine. I will say I think the challenge moment for me was, what am I going to do in the next phase of my career? And honestly, I could say that it was brilliant that I decided to pursue an MBA at Sloan, but the truth is it wasn't brilliant. It was just my midlife crisis where I said, you know what, I need to learn something different, some different set of skills. And so then starting that MBA program, I think came out of challenge. Hey, I'm unable to move the levers in the people around me at the hospital. What else can I be doing? But then the eureka moment came when you get together with a group of people that are not just physicians, but they're like students and engineers and builders and designers. You can change the world. You just have to pick a topic and you can change the world. So I would say that one of my biggest eureka moments was the first hackathon I went to, and just the whole concept that you can re-spark your imagination and really like build companies out of it. I think that is incredible.
mhm.
I'll say the second, you know me, I'll give you a second one. I'll say the second one happens more perpetually now, inpatient care. So for example, it happened this week where I now have these moments where I realize that if there's a day where I'm working with a group of people, whether I'm seeing patients or I'm working in real estate, sometimes I'm really letting it come to me that this person really needs help. And then I pause and I stop my day and I say, I'm going to really connect with this human being and really be able to help them. So this week, for example, I saw a patient, a middle-aged man, and he was really, I cannot sleep. I haven't been able to lose weight. Interestingly, that you mentioned this earlier, he's an immigrant to this country. He was a top, bodybuilder in another country, came here, and he has put on a lot of weight because that muscle, he's not able to really maintain the workout regimen given his work schedule. And I felt like I spent more time giving him hope for the future. Look, here's 6 or 7 things that you, sir, can do. Let me give you some action items. Some are medical related, some are not. Just resources that I know in the city and in the community to get you back on your feet, because you are someone who's in his mid 40s that is now starting to lose hope in the rest of your life. And I felt like even though I did nothing for him medically, I didn't prescribe him a medicine, I'm not doing a surgery on him right now. In fact, we chatted about how he could avoid these surgeries that he thought he needed in the future. But I feel like he left with hope, right? And he had gone through the system struggling with healthcare and housing in the recent last 2 years since he's moved to Boston. For me, those are the eureka moments, and those are the ones that are individual that then in real estate, I just hope can be even more at scale.
Yeah, yeah. Love both of them. Of course, first one being closer to me.
Exactly.
So, I mean, I had this question for you though. You're one of those people probably have 30 hours in a day, given the amount of things you do. But what keeps you going, like with like so much going on, like on every day-to-day basis, right? Like what is your secret sauce? What keeps you going generally?
I used to think that I and others would keep going from an intrinsic motivation. I have to be honest, I have really learned over the last few years through this coaching journey and just training, what keeps me going is having rituals and becoming super disciplined about there are actually only 24 hours in a day. And of those 24 hours, I definitely need to sleep at least 6, if not 8 hours. So with the remaining hours, what do? Do I just work from the moment I get up to the moment I sleep? Or do I take that time for spirituality, meditation, gratitude? That's what keeps me going now. It's just these daily habits of giving gratitude, saying thank you, thanking our creator for everything that I've had. And then second, I learned this really cool habit from the Tony community, which is I don't do it every day, but when you get up in the morning, in addition to starting with what am I grateful for? Like 3 things that you're grateful for, which I do every morning. There was also a moment where he was teaching and the classes were teaching, call someone or send them a message quickly, maybe for 20 seconds. And he does this every morning where you tell them how they particularly did something amazing, whether they helped you, you saw something they wrote online, and that's it. And just hang up. You don't have to talk to them. You just either text them or leave them a voice memo. And that just gives a little bit of juice to someone else's life. So that keeps me going. And the third thing is, watching our kids. Watching our kids really, we have 3 children, watching them learn and evolve from a life of you could easily just be stressed about what you do every single day to I need to be the model of being centered and being calm. And if you and I are having a conversation, then I'm paying attention to you, Shreyas, and actually not trying to multitask. I have some recommendations for your listeners. One of the most impactful humans for me in the last 5 or 10 years was a man named Jim Quick. And it's KWIK. And again, things come full circle. Jim Quick writes a lot about learning and focus and how you cannot multitask, but you have to monotask.
Yep.
Of course, the real estate conference I went to last year, earlier this year, Jim Quick was the keynote speaker. I mean, how those worlds collided, and I had an opportunity to meet him in person and thank him. I think anyone listening to this can think bigger, can manifest a lot of what they're looking to do. You just kind of have to be open to the fact that you don't have to figure it out. There's people around you. Like I rely on people around me to help me understand how to do it better and faster. And that's a big shift for me because my medical training was, how can I learn to do it better by myself, for my patients? But my newest mantra is, who around can help me to get to my goal faster so that I don't have to do all the hard work and it doesn't feel so exhausting at the end of the day.
Got it. So many good things in there. And isn't Jim Quick the person also who talks about like these mental models for remembering things?
Yes. He's the memory guy.
Memory guy. Yeah.
Absolutely.
My memory is bad, so yeah, I've not been watching.
Yes, and he has some very inexpensive online classes that I had taken, but the fact of the matter is he feels like you can rewire your brain.
Yeah.
And I feel like if we can all rewire the way we think and the way we remember and the way our brain works, then we can rewire our entire life. Yeah. So I just have to constantly remember that we have to do it every single day. If I miss a day of gratitude or prayer or giving thanks, or I haven't meditated in a few days, which are all, by the way, things that when you and I met, Shreyas, years ago, were not things that I did on a daily basis. If I miss those things, then I don't get my great work that I need to get done accomplished. And I think people don't realize the impact of slowing down and having that mindful moment.
Yep, 100%. I mean, I've been doing some of that stuff. I can see a change in my own self, so yes, completely agree. Wonderful. Ayesha, that brings us to the end of this conversation. Had so much fun and again, learned a lot. I mean, every conversation with you just like opens up, I don't know, a few new brain cells, if that's even a medically correct term. But yeah, thank you so much for doing this. And I hope you enjoyed this as well.
Oh my gosh. Thank you so much for having me. I hope your listeners understand what a valuable mission this is. It was such a pleasure. It's always a pleasure to chat with you and hear what great stuff you're up to.
All right. Thanks so much, Ayesha.